I think probably the best thing that any of us can do for other people's lives is to model what it is, that we would like other people to be able to achieve for themselves, to be a human being who is walking the talk. I call it living the virtues, and I'll talk about that again tomorrow in the seminar, and I talk about that quite a bit in the film, and looking at people who didn't have as many things as so many of us, the rest of us have, and the emphasis was on volunteering and serving and reaching out and getting your thoughts and your attention off of what's in it for me and how much can I get and who can I defeat and how much better am I than everybody else and how much stuff have I accumulated and how many awards do I talk about and how much do I always speak about myself and so on. And shifting, making that shift. And the shift is away from being so self-centered and so ego-driven into reaching out, asking the question, how may I serve? Is there anything that I can do for somebody else? Becoming volunteers, because there's nothing in this world that makes a person feel better and feel more God-realized and more on purpose when you're off of what's in it for me and onto how may I serve. And I think the interesting thing about that, and that's one of the reasons that I did the film, is that when you put your attention and you take the attention off of yourself and you put it on how may I serve, it's almost as if you align with something in the universe that is doing the very same thing. And instead of you saying, when you say to the universe, give me, give me, give me, or when you say to God, give me, give me, give me, I need more, it's almost as if you align with that kind of an energy, and the universe responds back to you with more of, you give me, give me, give me, give me, and you always feel under pressure. You always feel like you're never arriving. But when you say to the universe, when you say to God, when you say to everything and everyone that's out there, how may I serve? It's almost as if the universe turns around and responds back with, how may I serve you? How may I serve you? And all the things that you used to chase after and try to get a hold of and worry about whether you're going to have enough of them and so on, all of those things seem to just dissolve, and the universe begins to say, how may I serve you? And the more you serve others, the more it serves you, and the more that arrives in your life. You don't have to chase after it anymore. It's sort of chasing after you. When I do reach out to other people, I am taking care of myself. That's what I'm doing. That's the thing, because what does it do? What does it do when you reach out and serve another human being in any way? All it does is it makes you feel good. And one of my teachers, Swami Muktananda in India, had an ashram, and he would ask people as they walked into the ashram, do you know the difference between good and God? And when he would stop and they'd say, what? And he'd say, and he'd just make a finger he'd make a circle with his finger and his thumb, which is zero. It's like meaning there's one little zero, one little O. And that the answer is, there is no difference between good and God. That when you are doing something good, the opening lines of the Old Testament say, in the beginning God created heaven and earth, and all that God created, I think it's line 31, and all that God created was good, which means that God and good are one. So that feeling good and doing good and reaching out in that sense is really feeling God. And when you feel God within you, when you feel internally, when you feel the presence of a divine assistance or guidance, you're totally, completely taking care of yourself. You're making yourself feel good by reaching out and extending it to others. So that would be my answer to it at all. But the other thing I would always say is, even if people do say that back to you, I always say don't complain and don't explain. You don't have to explain. You know what you're doing. And the more of that you do, the more that seems to come into your life. That's just always worked for me. I don't know if it's true for everyone. And they say of the highest spiritual people, like Jesus, for example, that when Jesus would go into a village, just his presence in the village, because of the energy at which he lived, would be enough to elevate the energy of everyone in the community, or in wherever he would be. You've heard people say, well, don't be a Pollyanna, right? You've heard this over and over. What is a Pollyanna? Well, Pollyanna was a little girl who lived in a town, and everybody was gloom and everybody was down, and she comes to town, and as a result of her enthusiasm and her excitement, you remember this? Everybody starts feeling better, and all, because when you've got to, what you have to do when you're around that low negative energy, instead of saying they're bring me down, is reinforce the importance of not joining that kind of energy and presenting that, and then by staying in that place, not explaining yourself, not complaining, not finding fault with it, but just generating and sending out more and more of the kind of energy you're speaking about, you'll suddenly see people coming up. And you know who you'll notice it first? You'll notice it with little children, and you'll notice it even with animals.
Okay.
You know, because Patanjali put it this way. He had this wonderful line. He said, when you are steadfast in your abstention of thoughts of harm, that's judgment, directed towards yourself and others, that all living creatures will cease to feel fear in your presence. You just have to stay steadfast and just watch. And so you get the negativity, and instead of joining it and going down, you hang on to that and you watch. You'll start bringing those people up, and you'll never complain and you'll never explain.
There's that great Chinese proverb that says, if you're going to pursue revenge, you'd better dig 2 graves, because the rage and the revenge and the anger that you carry around with you is going to kill you. It'll take away your health. It'll take away your happiness. It'll destroy your relationships. It'll keep you from being in a state of love. It'll make you feel unworthy of any love that shows up towards you. It'll make you less attractive physically. It'll make you physically sick. There's no payoff that's good for it. And this man who behaved in these ways has taught you that. This isn't to say that this person shouldn't be held accountable for his conduct at all. What we're talking about here is just what goes on within you. You are, and everyone listening out there, you are all beings of love. You're beings of light. You have to come back to the remembrance of the light and the love that you came from. And that's what you're going to return to. Meantime, while you're here, we stay away from that, and then we wonder why our life doesn't work. And our life works so much better when we just go within and we get calm and we just say, you know what? Everybody out there is doing what they know how to do, given the conditions of their life. They're just doing the best they can right now in the circumstances that they're in. And who am I to tell anybody that out there that they ought to be doing it the way I'm doing it? Because basically behind that thinking is this notion, which is if only you were more like me, then I wouldn't have to be so unhappy. But the world isn't like you. The world is the way it is, and accepting the world the way it is and the people in it the way they are. And when we do that, we have less of that. It's trying to understand like bigger problems like war. We talk about war as if it's a way of resolving problems, and all it does is just intensify and create more of them. All of the people coming back from the wars right now are just, their lives are just such a mess. We take them over there, we put guns in their hands, and we tell them to go kill people and blow people up, and then they come back, and I've got a brother that's just living with such horrors over the things that he experienced when he was in Vietnam. It's just these unnatural ways of being. Our original nature is gentleness and kindness and service towards others. That's what we came from. And we've got to stay in that place, and anything that we can do to stay in that place and not allow that resentment. I remember when I was doing some work on my own recovery from some addictions, and I remember seeing a sign in the back of the room that said, and I've never forgotten this. In fact, I made it a chapter in my book, 10 Secrets for Success and Inner Peace. It said, there are no justified resentments. That's a theme in AA. There are no justified resentments. All of the resentments that you carry around within you, we try to justify them, but all they do is take us away from God. I'm reading a book right now called Ascended Master Training. It's from Saint Germain, and it's just great teachings because I've always felt that I've been sort of an ascended master in training since I was a young boy and protected from different things. And because of the books that I've written, most of them have just come out of the consciousness that you're just speaking about. When I let go and let God, which is what recovery is really all about, isn't it? It's about just letting go. And it's a theme. You hear it over again. Just let the universal Tao, this thing that cannot be named. Let this source that provides all of life, just let it flow through you. Let it beat your heart. It's going to anyway. Let it grow your fingernails, and let it digest your food. And let it also take care of everything. It's just like let go. And as you do that, you find that, so much of the stress, the relationships that you're in that cause stress, they just seem to get to a place where it's just not worth it. And all of a sudden, God starts sending you different people into your life, people that are going to make you feel better rather than people who are going to create more anxiety and stress. You're going to feel loved. You're going to see it everywhere. To try to talk to people who are in situations that they find themselves in that are just not pleasant or difficult, or the financial problems or whatever, it's almost impossible to get, ordinary thinking people to stop and say, you know what, I created all of these circumstances in my life. Whatever my financial situation, whatever the nature of my relationships are, these are all things that I've created. Instead of saying that the best is yet to come, I would shift that to the best is now. It's right here. It's not what's it's going to happen to you. It's not coming. It's here. You are it. It is you.
Doctor.
I get that when I go on stage. I get that when I sit down to write. I get it when I start to do this radio show and never knowing what the next call is going to be and where it's going to be from and whatever. And just knowing that my words and what comes out of me is out there helping people to feel better, to heal their lives. It's like all of this is a part of trusting in your own divinity. I said it very early in my career. When you trust in yourself, you're trusting in the wisdom that created you. You're really trusting in something that allowed you to come into this world. There's a love that supersedes and transcends all of the sadness, all of the bereavement, all of the focus on what's wrong with the world. And if everybody could take the excitement, the inner joy, the bliss that you are attempting to describe here and just enfold it into their lives and put their arms around it, then all of these things that we call problems would disappear, because basically at our core, we are all just pieces of God. That which looks out from behind your eyeballs, that which is speaking these words that you are speaking and that I am speaking, that's our highest self. Something that I learned from Neville, who was a man who lived in the early part of the last century. He was born in the early part of the last century. He died in 1972. And he was an itinerant lecturer and lectured all over the country and so on, and just talked about how to manifest and how to attract things into your life and so on. And he's the one that said, you do not attract what you want in life, you attract what you are. And the way that you do it, he said, is that you assume, this is really important words I'm about to give you, you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. That is, if you want your future dream to be a present fact, if you want your future dream to be a present fact, you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. So you go into your mind and why this works and how it works is that as you go in your imagination and imagine what it is that you would like, and then you go to the feeling and what that feels like in your body, as you do that, the reason that prosperity and abundance and jobs and things like that will start to show up for you is that when you go to that feeling of feeling good, that's the same as saying you feeling God. So feeling good and feeling God are the same thing. And in fact, the only thing that differentiates them is a zero, good and God, just one little O. Right. And then as you get to this place of feeling good, even if you look around and nothing that you want is working out, let's say you're sick and your illness doesn't go away, or let's say you're in a relationship that isn't working and you're depressed and things aren't working out the way you want, or the money isn't coming up, you still have your imagination. You still have your ability to think the thoughts that you want to think. And so in your imagination, you start using your imagination, because, Einstein said that imagination is everything. So that in your mind, as you go to this place and seeing what outcome do you want, and just get a picture of it, no matter how bleak things look around you. And then as you do that, as you go to this wonderful place within you where everything is working out, then you experience the feeling of that. What does that feel like in your body? What does it feel like? It feels good. And as soon as you then go to a state of feeling good, you now are aligned with God, how God works. God is feeling good and feeling God are the same thing. So now you're aligned. Now what happens is your subconscious mind, the place within you where so much of the things that happen for you just happen without you being conscious of it, your subconscious mind can't make a distinction between whether something is happening really in your life or whether it's just going on in your imagination, and it goes by the feeling. So the key thing here is then the last 5 minutes of the day, as you're going off to sleep at night and you're in your bed, instead of reviewing all the things that make you feel bad and all the things that aren't working and make that the principal occupation of your mind, you're going back to the feeling of, you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. You just keep assuming it, and then you go off to sleep. And now you got 8 hours. You got 8 hours of sleeping time for your mind to marinate in the same context with God. And then you begin to manifest. And lo and behold, the prosperity, the things begin to change. Your illness begins to go away. The relationship begins to work out the way you want. And, you're activating something very powerful within yourself. Because we go through our days, we go through our life, and we pay attention to what we see and what we touch and what we feel and what we smell, and that becomes our reality. And we think that that's the only reality that there is. If I can touch it, if I can see it, if I can grab a hold of it, I can smell it, then that makes it real. And if I can't, then it's unreal. And what this is really about is understanding the power of our imagination, so that when we put an let's just say you've got a cold or you've got a flu or something like that. And if you're putting into your imagination, I am well, I am perfect health, I am well, but you watch your nose and it sneezes and it's running and you've got a fever and, you're tired and all of that. The concept of being able to say I am well and living from that place in your imagination, it's so foreign to us because we're just so convinced that what our senses tell us is the only reality that there is. And what this is really all about is being able to live from the end and put it into your imagination. And regardless of what your senses tell you, regardless of what it says on the internet, regardless of what information people are sending to you, regardless of what it says on TV or articles that you read or whatever it is, whatever I am you would like to have, including I am prosperous, I am abundant, And you look at your bank book and you say there's nothing in it, and, and I've got bills, and how can I go around saying I am prosperous when these are all but it's being able to place into your imagination that I am, realizing that the words I am really are the name of God, and to say I am prosperous rather than I will be, because to say I will be prosperous or I will be healthy means to say that I don't have that now, and I don't, and it's something that maybe will come in the future. And until you can assume a feeling of something in your imagination and just live with it regardless of what all of the other physical evidence says, because basically what we learn is that the physical world is just an illusion, that it's what's in our imagination that is the real, the real truth.
Let me read to you one of the great ladies, one of the great writers ever. Her name's Lillian Smith, and her writing is so profound. Well, this is what she says. She says, to pray, it is so necessary and so hard. Hard not because it requires intellect or knowledge or a big vocabulary or special techniques, but because it requires of us humility. And that comes, she said, I think, from a profound sense of one's brokenness and one's need. Not the need that comes and causes us to cry, get me out of this trouble, quick, please, God, but the need that one feels every day of one's life, even though one does not acknowledge it, to be related to something bigger than oneself. It comes out of our brokenness. The need to be related to something bigger than our puny little egos, to be connected. And that's a sense of brokenness. Broken from spirit, broken from the return trip. Tao is the way of return. It's returning to the place from which we started and know it for the first time. And she says, but the need that one feels every day of one's life, even though one does not acknowledge it, to be related to something bigger than oneself, something more alive than oneself, something older and something not yet born that will endure through time. That was Lillian Smith writing in the introduction to The Journey. That out of this need to overcome this brokenness comes the afternoon of our life. Comes this time when we say, my connection to God, to Source, to Tao, to universal mind, to spirit, to that from which I originated, from which I can never be disconnected, which is who and what I am, my own divinity. It's never too late to teach that. And it's never too early to teach that. You can do it with your babies. This is why I've got two little children's books, two wonderful children's books. One's called Incredible You, and the other one just came out. It's called Unstoppable Me. So now we enter this thing, this change, this something takes over for us. And this thing called a quantum shift or a quantum change in our hearts takes over. And once it does, there's no going back. So now, well, let me describe first the quantum shift, the quantum change. When you make this shift, when a quantum change takes place, when it takes place and you move from the number one priority of your life being to get good grades, to fit in, to be a good daughter or a good mother or to fit in with your family business or whatever it is that it might be, when that shift has completed itself and you now realize that there's something greater, something grander, something more profound. In a book called Quantum Change, they suggest that when these things come into your life and the shift is on, that the experiences are so dramatic that they often are accompanied by voices that we hear and an energy that we experience in our life that no one else knows. Here's a friend of mine. His name's Bill Wilson. He was the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he said these words about this. It's called the mystical type of quantum change. He said, "My depression deepened unbearably, and finally it seemed to me as though I were at the bottom of the pit. I still gagged badly at the notion of a power greater than myself." That's the ego at work. "But finally, just for a moment, the last vestige of my proud obstinacy was crushed. All at once, I found myself crying out, 'If there is a God, let him show himself. I am ready to do anything. And suddenly, the room lit up with a great white light. I was caught up into an ecstasy which there are no words to describe. It seemed to me, in the mind's eye, that I was on a mountain and that a wind, not of air, but of spirit, was blowing. And then it burst upon me that I was a free man.'" A wind of spirit.
I did a film called My Greatest Teacher, which was a story of my relationship and trying to find my father. And it turns out that what he did when I was a young boy and all of his horrible, crass behavior and so on were really the impetus for my being able to reach to higher and higher levels. And while you're reviewing that and looking at that, instead of coming at it from a place of brokenness, come at it from a place of completeness.
For me, it's been a state of just allowing it to come to me. I've never chased after things. It's like, I shouldn't say I never have. I don't any longer. I did at one time in my life, and I found that the more I chased, the more I tried to grasp, the more I tried to make it happen, so the more it would elude me. But when I would just let go and have a real clear vision of seeing myself serving in some capacity, that whatever it was that I needed would just show up. I don't know if that's helpful to you or not, but getting that inner picture for yourself is, and getting it to, being more at peace with it is, because so much of our energy is around shortages and lacks, and I don't have enough, and I'm not going to make enough. It's all about me. When your focus is off of that and onto serving and offering and allowing and creating, the phone will ring. Something will show up in the mail. Somebody will call you and, or see you and say, you know what, you'd be the perfect person for this place. When somebody comes up to you and says, why don't you apply here? Or what, and you think, well, that was just a coincidence, or I was looking for a job or whatever. But that isn't. That's the way the universe works. I think that's how God works within us. When we're at peace, when we're letting go, and we're not trying, in the Tao it says, let yourself be lived by it. Instead of you living it and trying to do it and conquer it and be in charge of it, let yourself be lived by it. Relax, let go within, and just know that whatever it is that you need to be doing at this moment, it's all in divine timing. It's all perfect. There's nothing that's not going to work out for you. I don't know. That's always worked for me my entire life. I've never had a shortage of jobs. I've always had more offers than I could handle. Job hunting has never been a difficulty thing for me, and so I'm not always a good person to talk to about it, except that it's, I've always just had a knowing that whatever it is that I find interesting or exciting or passionate or moving or motivating or whatever, that I know within me that there's a way to make a living at that. It isn't just something that I find of interest. It doesn't make any difference what it is. It's like I tell my son Sans, who's going to be 21 on October the 9th, and he just got back from a trip to Indonesia doing surfing, and he's in school, he's in college, he's up at the University of Central Florida, and he's doing fine, and his whole life, his whole passion, everything about his life is this surfing thing. I mean, he just gets up in the morning and he checks where the waves are all over the world, and when you watch him on a surfboard, it's totally his passion. And I've told him so many times, you don't have to go to business school, you don't have to go to college if that's not, especially now at the age of 20, if that's not what you want to be. That feeling that you have of being on a surfboard and riding that wave and being at one with the ocean, all the excitement, the energy. I mean, he talks endlessly about it. It's just, it's his whole life. I said, there's a way to make a living at that. Just begin to imagine yourself as being able to do this, and still, whether I'm teaching other people about it, whether I work in a surf shop, whether I start my own surf shop, whether I do surf lessons, on a beach, whether I make surfboards, whether I study oceanography, whatever it might be, whether I get on one of these boats and learn how to, be a captain on a boat that takes surfers around. There's endless numbers of ways to, when you see surfboards and you see people out there surfing, somebody has to make the boards and somebody has to teach them. And I said, it's like, follow your passion, follow your bliss. Know within, this is what excites me. This is the thing that turns me on. And if it is, and it doesn't matter what age you are or how long you've been doing what you've been doing. I have men in their 40s and 50s say to me that, well, I can't change professions now. I've been doing it for 25 years. I said, well, who decided that you were going to be, say, an engineer or a lawyer or a doctor or whatever it is? Well, I decided that when I was 18. I said, and you're now 50? Would you go to an 18-year-old and ask that 18-year-old for advice on what you should be doing in your life? And I said, well, of course not. That's ridiculous. I said, well, isn't that what you're doing? You're allowing an 18-year-old to decide that because that's what you decided a long time ago, but your passion is pulling you in this direction. Listen to that bliss. I think it's a real important lesson. I got to tell you this. I had one of the most beautiful experiences, and I've been doing it with every chapter of this book that I'm writing, Excuses Be Gone. With every chapter, before I start the next chapter, and there are 18 chapters, I go out to this place. It's about 30 miles, maybe 35 miles from where I am on Maui, in West Maui, and it's a waterfall. And this waterfall comes down, like about 50 feet or so, and there's a pool there. And I go into this place, and I stay under this waterfall, and I let the water just cascade down on my head. And in those hours that I spend out there in that peaceful, beautiful place, everything I need to know for the next chapter is there. I don't have an outline. I don't have any organization. I don't have a suit and tie. I don't have any... all of the accoutrement that we have, that we believe is associated with a job, is all gone. And I'm out there in this beautiful, blissful place in the middle of this jungle, and it's a rainforest, and it's the most beautiful place in the world. And I come out of there, and it's almost as if God wraps his arms around me and says, this is what you'll need to do for this next chapter. Just go in there, be at peace. And when I leave there, after a couple of hours of being immersed in nature and finding my own nature in there, I come back here and I sit down and I write, and everything just flows so easily and so beautifully. You follow your bliss. You just allow, and everyone else thinks, well, that's crazy. You're driving 35 miles, then you have to hike 2 hours into this place, and it's so isolated, and you go out there. And I said, I wouldn't even begin to know how to start a chapter without making conscious contact with God, and that's how I do it. It's just my way. Mm-hmm. But it's not the way. It's just my way.
Joel Goldsmith, in his book, Parentheses in Eternity, once said that in the presence of the God realized that the laws of the material world do not apply. So that if we're able to reach this place of God realization, where we're in alignment with the source of our being, where I just call it thinking like God thinks, which is what Einstein's famous quote was. I don't care about the details. I just want to learn to think like God thinks. Like whatever the source of being, even if you're an atheist, there is a source of, there is an invisibleness from which all visible things originate. I mean, the greatest scientists on the planet will tell us that, and then in the Tao it says very clearly that, that all being originates in non-being. So whatever that non-beingness is, the closer you get to how you think it acts and feels. And it's very interesting because when I wrote a book a few years back called The Power of Intention, it was that idea, that principal idea, that there is a way for us that intention isn't something that we do through the ego. Intention is a field of energy from which all things are intended. And if you can stay aligned with what that is like, then that's when the miracles take place. And I've done endless programs and lectures and so on, and contemplated this stuff in front of very large audiences and on tapes and so on. Right. And basically, what I feel is that as you elevate your consciousness, as you begin to remove the influences and the power and the draw of the ego, and begin to substitute your inner mantra shifts to how may I serve and what may I do for you, your false self less and more about just serving, then that's when the miracles, that's when healings take place. That's when abundance begins to show up. That's when, that's what they said even of Jesus. I mean, when he was God on earth. I mean, like Buddha, and in the presence of that kind of realization, even death itself couldn't survive. Even illness can't survive. That,
wow.
Like the story of Lazarus, in the Bible, because of that consciousness, that
Right.
when you're in the presence of that consciousness, death doesn't exist because there is no death. I've said so many times, and I just talked to a girl whose mother died last week, and she was just so upset about it. And I was saying, you haven't grasped the idea that she can't really die. She was in a little baby body. She was in a toddler's body. She was in a teenage body. She was in a 20 and a 30 and a 40-year-old body. She's been in hundreds, thousands, a new body every single day. And the body keeps changing and going
Right.
through the process of decay and death, which we all go through, growth, decay, death. But who she is, her isness, whatever it is that keeps being in these other bodies, is no different now than it was when she was 12 and when she was 18 and so on. And that part can't die. And when you get that, when you really begin to realize that, that's when these kinds of miracles that I've spoken about so often in my life, when, the idea that when you put we call it a coincidence, but, when we have a thought and that thought is so aligned with spirit and it's not focused on what's in it for me, that the manifestation of that thought, the physical manifestation of that thought begins to take place. Thomas
Right.
Crowder talked about this in the early part of the 1900s. He said that when you begin to contemplate in the same way that God contemplates, then you gain the same powers that God has. The ability to create, the ability to manifest, the ability to heal, the ability to have things happen for you. That's what happens as you start contemplating your life, not from the perspective of how the ego does, like how much more can I get and I'm competing with others and so on, but you begin to contemplate in terms of how may I serve, how may I offer, how may I, be able to reach out. And as you do that, and I know I get so excited when I think about this topic, that even the least among you, as Jesus was saying, that I'm no different than you. He says somewhere in the New Testament, is it not written, like in the Old Testament, that I have said that it is said that you are gods, that we are all gods, that we are all pieces of God, we are all fragments of God. And as we think like that, the least among us, and I think what is referred to as the least, and remember, we're talking about interpretations here. Who knows what the
Right.
least means? So that's just some translators, use of a phrase that was, that was uttered thousands and thousands of years ago. I would assume that to be what you said, that the feeble among us, those that will inherit the earth, becoming the observer to your life. It's like my teacher in India said that don't take your life so personally. Beginning to become the observer to your life, and as you become the observer, you begin to notice that these miracles really do occur. That the things that St. Francis was able to do. That birds would come and just land on his shoulder. I've had butterflies come and just land and talk to me.
I would like to go through quickly what I think of as the 5 most important lessons that you can have in communing with Source. As you approach Source, whether you call it prayer, meditation, as you approach Source, it is important for you to understand first and foremost, and this is one of the most difficult and most easily open to misinterpretation, as Abraham says, if there's nothing you can do about it, then it's not about you. Again, if there's nothing you can do about it, then it's not about you. Now you watch the news and an event that has already taken place, there's nothing you can do about it, is there? Then it's not about you. Now the reason I say this, and I don't want you to misinterpret this, is this. Hawkins speaks over and over in Power versus Force about force always creating a counterforce. When you see an event take place that is a train being blown up and 197 people are killed in Spain, or yesterday 31 more people killed over there, 10 more soldiers over there the day before, people blowing themselves up, blowing their children up to make a when you see this kind of stuff, what does it make you feel? You feel bad, don't you? When you feel bad, you attract the energy of what it is that you are feeling. Like it or not, you will get whatever you think about, you will get. Whether you want it or not, you will get it. Whatever you're thinking about. So if you're thinking about how much you hate the people in the world who would do such despicable things, and you fill yourself with the same energy that they are sending to you, you have now magnified the amount of low energy in the world. It is incumbent upon you, if you're approaching Source, to say, I intend to feel good, meaning I intend to feel God at any moment. And if enough of us were to collectively reach that critical mass where we say, I refuse to be depressed, I refuse to be upset, I refuse to be in a state of anger and terror because there is that in the world. Instead, I intend to feel good. If enough of us do it and we reach a critical mass, they'll stop reporting it. The second of these, and I think this is probably the most important in terms of your own personal lives, is to remember that God, Source, cannot be anything other than what it is. It can't be what it isn't. Now, what is it? It is abundance. It is well-being. Let's just take those two. It's many other things. It's non-exclusion. Now you come to it with a thought that is not of God. That thought is, I have scarcity in my life. And that thought is, I have illness in my life. So now you get down on your knees and you say, please heal me of my illness. And you say, please send me my abundance, my money, whatever it is, because I've got scarcity. But now, this source, which can only be what it is, how can it recognize what it isn't? Listen to these words from the Course. Because your idea is not of God, God does not respond to it. To respond to it would give it reality. If God were to respond to anything other than the idea of perfect oneness, there would no longer be perfect oneness. Does that make sense? So, you can't go to God and ask God, which is perfect abundance, to replace your scarcity because it doesn't know anything about scarcity. And you can't ask it to heal you because it knows nothing about illness, because it is nothing but well-being. All of our illnesses, all of them, are collectively from generations upon eons of egos that have convinced themselves that they're not living in a state of perfect health, regardless. And death is not even entered into it, because death is not a punishment. It's not even a reflection of illness. It is just all that composes, decomposes. And you just return, take off. Third, Source, and returning to Source, and gaining the power of the Source and the power of intention is not about learning something new. You're not going to get it here. You're not going to get it in books and tapes and so on. You might get some clues, but you're not going to get it that way. It's about remembering. It's about remembering. The ego is the part of you that's separated from Source and believes in its separation, and also believes in all that it owns and all that it does and all that its reputation reflects. But you must learn to remember. All of it is illusion. You have a choice of finding your way through the veils of forgetfulness back to where you belong. It's about remembering. When you're struggling, remember. When you're sick, remember you are well-being. And reach for a thought that is in harmony with well-being. Fourth, Source knows. Don't ever assume that Source forgets. Every dog, every cat, every raccoon, every rat, every animal that has fur on it, when winter comes, even before winter gets here, even when it's still fall and still summer, what happens to your horse and to your dog and to your cat and to your rats? What happens to their fur? It starts to what? It starts to expand and get stronger, doesn't it, and get thicker. Every one. It never forgets a rat. How could you ever assume it could forget you? It never forgets. It never forgets. Source always knows. Don't presume to tell it something or that it's forgotten. What you're going through, what struggles you're having, what's missing are all because you have aligned with that kind of thinking. And finally, when you approach Source, approach it with an awareness that it doesn't need you to love it. God doesn't need you to love God. God isn't worried, in my opinion, and I have the mic. God doesn't worry. God doesn't need you to love it, doesn't need you to build temples for it. God doesn't need you to chant to it. God doesn't need you to love God. God, I believe, Source, the way that you show your love for Source is by taking the love that you emanated from and loving each other. Share, give. Source is for giving. The way that you show your love for God is to extend that love that is God, that is you, everywhere.
If you're willing to go back to what your life was like in the first 9 months and surrender and not worry and get out of the way and then be in a state of just gratitude. If the only prayer you say every day, if the only prayer you say is thank you, that's enough. You're on your way. It's staying in that state of gratitude and knowing and never fighting it. And whatever comes, even if it doesn't make any sense to you whatsoever, you embrace it. You embrace it. Because that passion that you feel is God speaking to you, saying, Don't die with your music still in you. Don't get to that place. Everything looks different from a distance when you get back. Imagine stepping back and looking at this entire planet from a distance. And I kept thinking about that. And every time I would look at this picture of Lao Tzu and I would ask, and then the day before, the writing would be so sweet, so perfect. And I'd call my editor and I'd read it and I'd say, I'm Lao Tzu. What's going on here? I'm going to be speaking Chinese next. It was overwhelmingly powerful to do this. From a distance, I've been sitting there writing across the miles and across the centuries, listening to someone speak to me. When I don't even hear the voice, I just let it flow. And it flows out in perfect harmony. 540 individual pages, handwritten, which will be edited, all without one moment of doubt, without one moment of consideration for writer's block or not knowing whether it will happen. From that same perspective, for every single one of you in this room, there is an awareness that there is something grander and greater that awaits you when you get back to that first 9 months of your life, where you surrender and let go and allow it to come and flow. I want to read something to you from Carl Jung. The morning of our life doesn't have anything to do with your age. Some people never have a morning of their life, like Jesus, Lao Tzu, Buddha, Zoroaster, the great spiritual teachers. They just show up, and they don't have to go through certain kinds of things that we are trained. But I had a morning of my life and an afternoon, and I'm in an evening. The morning of our lives, we are taught certain things from the time that we emerge from the womb. And what we are taught when we emerge from the womb is almost everything the opposite of living Tao consciousness, living the hidden virtues, living God realization. You learn from the people around you who are doing their absolute best to raise you to be good citizens, very likely. Mothers and fathers and grandparents and cultures and the church organizations and all the things. But most of it is designed to get you to fit in, to be a good person, to be a good family member, to follow the rules, to get good grades, to get through this class and that class, to get through this degree and that degree, to graduate, to get it to a certain job, to do whatever it takes on the job in order to get yourself a promotion. And it's about fitting in, all of which are non-Tao principles. That doesn't matter. It's not about the Tao when you're getting the morning of your life. And then something happens. What I call a quantum shift takes place. And you move into something called the afternoon of your life or the evening of your life. And here, your values, your desires, what it is that is important to you have done a complete radical shift. It's no longer the most important thing for you to please your parents. It's no longer the most important thing for you to get good grades or even to get a good house, the right house. You begin to feel a sense of connectedness to everything and everyone from a distance. You look at this planet and you think, how could anything on here be fighting each other? We're all breathing the same air. We all came from the same place. How could there possibly be enemies? When you look at it from that, there's an interconnectedness. As you get to one of these quantum shifts in your life, things that were so important to you in the morning of your life no longer are important. And I suggest that most people who would attend a conference such as this, here, in this beautiful place, on these beautiful days, and sit and listen to speakers from all over the world come and talk to you about it, that virtually everyone in this room is moving into or has moved into something called the afternoon of your life, in which the general priorities of your life, what you expect out of it, what you expect to do while you're here, have shifted. And it no longer satisfies you, it no longer fulfills you to live the afternoon of your life by the rules that you learned in the morning of your life.